Good evening, and welcome to the March 11, 2020 special legislative session of the Town Board. Tonight we have only one item on this agenda. Once we have completed this agenda item, we'll take a short break. We'll move to the back of the room and we'll pick up on our normal work session agenda. To get started tonight, I'll ask, before you sit down, gentlemen, I'll ask everyone please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So again, this is a special legislative session. This is a public information meeting on Shadow Pines. The intent of the meeting this evening will be to listen to the presentation that we'll have from Andrew Spencer from BME. He's the consultant. BME was a consultant that the town hired to prepare a draft conceptual master plan. And he'll give a presentation. And then we have a number of people that have signed up to speak. If you haven't signed up, you'll have an opportunity to speak after those that have signed up. And you can ask questions, provide thoughts, comments, input, or otherwise. I understand that there are a number of folks that elected not to come tonight, just in light of everything that's going on in the news, and we respect that. They're watching from PC TV and Spectrum TV channel 1303, and also we're streaming this live. And then down the road, later this week, next month, if someone wanted to see these proceedings again, they can go in and get that information off our website overall. I'm going to ask our clerk, Sue, if she would read the notice of this meeting, and then we will start in.
To allow the public to review and comment the conceptual master plan for the Shadow Pines properties. The notice was published in the Penfield Post on February 27th, on the town's website, on the town clerk's bulletin board, and 82 postcards were mailed.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Okay, this evening, again, I'm going to introduce Andrew Spencer with BME. He's got about a 10 to 15 minute presentation that he's going to provide. I know there's some handouts. I see our team in the back, Mr. Costello and company. There are handouts, so if you would like a copy of the handout, please feel free. And Nels, if you wouldn't mind, if there's some folks, if you wouldn't mind just handing those out so that they have them. And then, Andy, if you would start and kind of lead us through the slides that you have. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone today? It's a wonderful day today. I'm going to be bringing you through a very brief overview of where we are in the process coming up with this conceptual master plan, and make a point of this is conceptual in nature. This is taking a lot of the input that we received from both the town board, town staff, and also some of the reports that had been prepared for the Shadow Lakes property, the Shadow Pines property. I'm sorry.
Please speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. Is that better? Yes. Okay. So what I'll be doing is kind of giving you an overview of where we are in the process and what we have conceptually shown on the plan. Again, it's conceptual in nature. It can change, but I think what this shows and what we have implemented on this concept plan is a majority of the proposed activities that have been on the site or proposed for the site. And what we have done is kind of shuck and jive and try to position where those uses are going to be on the site and the reasons why we're showing them where they are this evening. So I'll start right off with what we had done is we had reviewed the Shadow Pines advisory report from September 2016 and also the final report from 2019. Looked at the proposed uses, the proposed use of the site, what those reports and that committee had come up with for what we want to see on the site. And we've also reviewed other potential opportunities, speaking with town staff and elected officials on what else might be an opportunity on the site. We also had discussions with some third-party organizations and associations. We know that there are a number of associations that would like to implement some of their own uses on the site, be it the Genesee Orienteering organization, the cross-country skiing clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And so we took some of that input in as well, thought about it, and then tried to allocate locations on the site where it might be possible to do that. And we did take, and what this is based upon is information that we've gleaned from the town, the GIS information, the base map that we see today. I'll go over that very briefly. I don't know if everybody has actually coursed through the entire property or not, but there's some pretty interesting areas on the site that lead to some of the uses for some of those areas, where some uses are a little bit better in some of the sites and on some of the sites. With that, we know where the site is, correct? Everybody understands where this is. So for this map itself, Clark Road is this right here. Wow, look at that shake. I have to do that, right? Atlantic Avenue, of course, is to the top, and then Whalen Road is right here, okay? And that is the Dolomite pit as it exists today. This aerial photograph is approximately a 2015, 2016 vintage, so it does not show the actual condition of the site today. So from an existing conditions perspective, I just want to point out a few things. This is 227 acres of land. We have 102 acres on what I call the north side being from Whalen Road up to Atlantic Avenue, which is this zone here, and approximately 115 acres of land down in the southern portion. The shading patterns that you see in the southern portion, these are based upon the GIS information from the town and include both a woodlot EPOD as well as a steep slope EPOD, environmental protection areas on the site, according to town mapping. What you can't see on this particular map very well, unfortunately, is we show all the topography of this site, and we actually gleaned that from the New York State GIS website. We have not done a topographic survey of the site. We're using base and background information available from other locations. Access to the site, currently, there's only 2 points of access to either the north or the south, and they occur right in here. I'm sorry, the existing Clark House is in this corner, the existing cart building, and then access to a parking field here, and secondary vehicular access to the maintenance facility down in the southeast of the site. There's one pedestrian and/or golf cart crossing that we know of, and it's on the Clark Road, right approximately in this location here. I think one of the other environmental features of the site are actually there's a few ponds on the site, as you maybe well know. There's 2 small ponds on the north, this one in this location, and a little bit of a larger one, which was on hole number 9, which is coming back into the clubhouse. There are actually fish in there, and it could actually be a location where we could provide an overlook area and perhaps a fishing opportunity. For smaller children, perhaps. I don't think we're going to be coming out with largemouth bass or anything. So that's a very, very brief overview of the existing conditions of the site. We'll get right into what have we done, what are we proposing. I think that's why you're all here, is to understand that a little bit better. What we had been able to glean from all of the information that we took a review of and through our discussions with the town, we are looking at these uses for the site. One might be a municipal recreation center, potentially a disc golf course, pavilions, and picnic areas on the site, cross-country running trails, and I know the site is currently being used in that and for that purpose. Cross-country skiing and snowshoe trails, the site is currently being utilized for that as well. A mountain biking area, and we'll show where that is and where we're proposing to have that on the site. Biking trails, which are non-mountain, and mixed-use walking trails. So a culmination and combination of uses of biking and walking, potentially even running on hard surface trails through the site. Potential even for a fitness trail with fitness stations, orienteering through the site, and a majority of the site to remain in an open meadow-like character. Okay. So from a municipal recreation use, we are proposing this on the north side of the property. And I'll get to a map in just a moment. I'm just going to run through and try to entice you with some photographs first and see how pleasant some of these uses can be. But around the municipal recreation area, we might be considering hard courts, basketball courts, pickleball courts. It's an up-and-coming sport. We're looking at potentially grass and or sand volleyball that might be associated in this area. A playground for younger children, maybe associated adjacent to a rec center that could be placed on the site. And a few multi-use recreation fields. Now, these fields are not designed for any particular use. They're not baseball fields, softball fields, or soccer fields. They're literally placed on the site as open areas that you can go out and do anything. Play frisbee, play soccer, play badminton, and wiffle ball, anything of that nature. Another use that we're looking at is a disc golf course. I don't know if anybody plays disc golf. I'm an avid fan. And actually, a retrofit to an existing golf course into a disc golf course is very, very easy to do. We have plenty of area on the site, and I can kind of show you where that is as we move forward here. Pavilion and picnic areas. We do have the existing structures on the site. And there may be some reutilization of those structures. They do need to be looked at from an architectural and a structural consideration. We don't know how good they are structurally, but they might be able to be reutilized in some purpose. Otherwise, perhaps some of the materials that come out of those structures can create pavilions and or picnic shelters through the site. We're showing a few pavilions, one on the north, one on the south, perhaps even a secondary shelter area on the southwest portion of the site. And I'll depict where that is in just a moment. The running of the cross-country trails, what we have laid out on the site is approximately a 5-kilometer trail, which is what the high schools use for their cross-country running. And it covers both the north and the south portions of the site. Of course, cross-country skiing and snowshoe trails, we're kind of proposing a little bit of a different type of use on both the north and the south based upon some of the topography. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but the site is acclimated perfectly for cross-country skiing, especially the southern area because of the topography and the topography change. Do a lot of climbing up some of those hills and have some great downhill runs on the southern portion of the site. And mountain biking. We are proposing a single track style mountain biking route on the site. Primarily, it's going to go in the southwest area of the site, and there's reasons. I'll show it to you in just a moment. Come on. And the non-mountain biking that I suggested, and this goes along with the multi-use trails. So there's an awful lot of existing trails on the site, and they all are predominantly north-south oriented on the north portion of the site, and there's a combination of a few north-south, but mainly east and west on the southern portion. There's almost too many trails, too many asphalt lanes through that area to create areas for some of the other uses. So one of the proposals may be to remove some of the existing ones, create a more circuitous pathway, potentially around the perimeter and through the center of the site, but try to reduce all of the trails that come through. A fitness trail with fitness stations. This might be oriented near the recreation center, and what this could be is a combination of moving equipment and or stationary equipment that you would place around some type of circuit, be it a quarter mile or a half mile circuit, walk through, get to a station, do an activity, a push-up, a pull-up, what have you. It could be very, very good to have that for everybody in our community. Get them out, get them active through the site. Orienteering, this really doesn't have a quote-unquote place to put on the site. This could be a course that could be changed throughout time. I did speak to the head of a Boy Scout troop here in Penfield, who was very, very interested in having the Boy Scouts create an orienteering course on the site so they could go out and practice and also have meets. I didn't know this previously, but there's actually orienteering races that occur. They go out and actually, you're timed. You start, you go, you run, you get to your station, and the winner is that who comes in with the lowest amount of time. Pretty interesting. Never did that as a Boy Scout myself. And one of the main characteristics of the site is going to be, and is being proposed as more of a natural meadow, natural feature, natural aesthetic. We have the opportunity with a lot of the fairways and the greens and to let those grasses grow as they are today, and be very, very interesting to see what comes up over time. We'll find that herbaceous perennials will be taking over some of these areas. Other grasses and native plants will start to come into these areas. And these photos right here, a little difficult to see, but this is the character that can be achieved in the golf course, in a majority of the golf course. And that is going to be good for the environment. It's going to be a pleasant aesthetic to take a look at, but we're going to be able to see and attract birds and mammals and butterflies, pollinators, and really develop more of an ecosystem on the golf course. I'm a golfer. I love golf. I love the pristine green grasses, but from an ecological standpoint, golf courses are dead zones because of the amount of pesticides, fertilizers, irrigation that they utilize on the course. This is a great opportunity to turn something around to make it environmentally friendly, plus also aesthetically pleasing. You have the overall plan in your hands. Again, I'm going to bypass this slide right now. We're going to go immediately to the shared uses that'll go through the site. Right now, what we're proposing is a cross-country running trail. I spoke of a 5-kilometer trail. It actually courses through, crosses Clark Road, comes through. I may not be pointing directly at it, and I apologize because I'm so far away. But on that plan and behind me, you can see a delineation of a 5-kilometer trail that goes through here. Cross-country ski trails. Anticipate that cross-country skiing would continue on the north and the south side. Now, we have proposed that the north side be a little bit of more of a natural trail location. Maybe that is not the groomed side, and used just for recreation purposes. The elevation changes on the north side are approximately maybe 20 feet. So if we say this is a point zero, by the time we get over to the west side, we have about a 20-foot climb. On the south side, and I don't know if everybody's has walked through the center of the site, you know that there are some very steep hills and some very, very long climbs there. We have elevation differences of 60 to 80 feet in this area, which could make it very, very attractive to do a groomed and a wide groomed trail, which might actually be acceptable for cross-country ski racing. Like down in Mendon Ponds Park. I don't know if anybody's been down there. With the very wide trails, they actually do skating and ski skating and racing down there, and it's all up and down hills and things. The south side really calls to me, and I am a cross-country skier as well, there's a great opportunity in this zone. You have those climbs, long climbs, and some very, very long downhill runs. Walking trails on both sides, as I had said, taking some of the path network away, but keeping a majority of it in place. And the path network on the south side might be in the center in connectivity to some of the outlying areas. On the north side, taking away some of those in the middle and putting them on the exterior of the site, and a few that might go through the center of the site. Passive nature observation, of course, that's going to occur everywhere, but if we get that grassland, meadow-style aesthetic, we're going to have even more to look at. The biking, that pretty much on the overall site. Picnic pavilion areas, I suggested that one picnic pavilion area might be placed north of the Clark House. Another pavilion might be placed to the south here. Again, this is the maintenance facility. We have an existing vehicular access drive that we can utilize to provide vehicular access to a picnic area or a pavilion. So that's something that the town might be able to rent out to any of the residents for family gatherings, parties, larger gatherings, larger picnics. On the north side, it's been positioned just north of the Clark House to make use of the existing parking field that is there. But we were also proposing an expansion of parking. I think a lot more people could use this site with a number of different activities and uses. Want to make sure we have enough parking to get people into the site and off the roadway networks. So we would be proposing some additional parking just to the north of the existing field. What that is, that may just be a grass area that you can park on, or it may be a gravel parking lot. Doesn't necessarily have to be a paved location. I know that when Shadow Pines would do larger golf tournaments in the summertime, they would have all of that additional parking off into that grass zone. I know it can work. So it can function as a parking area during the summertime. I'm going to talk a little bit about the connectivity to the site. From a pedestrian perspective, there's very, very little pedestrian connectivity at this point. There is a sidewalk that's along Atlantic Avenue. There are no sidewalks on Whalen, and there's only a little bit of a sidewalk on Clark Road. If I'm not mistaken, it stops somewhere in this location here. Okay, I apologize, I misspoke. But there is a sidewalk that runs in a location here, if I'm not mistaken, coming to the north. But let me go back to, there's hardly any pedestrian connectivity. So what we'd like to do is try to promote pedestrian access to this site. How do we do that, and where do we do that? There is a sidewalk on Whalen in this location, but we could promote pedestrian access from this point coming into the site onto the trail network. We do have our existing light at Whalen and Atlantic. That might, if that was improved with a crosswalk and stop bars and things of that nature, we could at least get children across from the middle school to be able to get into the site, and potentially there might be some educational activities. Go back to that meadow, looking at wildlife and observing wildlife. That might be part of the an ecological program that they might have at the middle school. There is also the sidewalk that is on Atlantic Avenue, and potentially a connection point for pedestrians at the northwest corner to get into the site, into a pathway. And also along Clark Road, potentially in this location, to be able to get to a pathway to get into that path network within the site. We would propose leaving that Clark Road access, potentially putting up a crosswalk in the area, flashing lights, something of that nature, so we can get connectivity with the north and the south with pedestrians, and also with bikes. I mean, if you're running, if you run a trail up here with a bike and being able to cross over Clark Road to get to the south, I think is very, very important. So we want to make sure that connectivity exists. One of the last locations that we had proposed connectivity is here. I apologize. Harwood Circle. There is an existing 60-foot right-of-way on Harwood Circle that goes into the site right here. And we propose a pedestrian connection here as well, to get everybody from this portion of the neighborhood. They have direct access and not having to go out to Atlantic or down to Clark Road to get there. Okay? Any questions thus far on what I've kind of covered?
Okay, before we get into that, I know that there's a lot of questions, but you can't do it from your seat. You've got to come to the podium, because we're taping this. We want to make sure everybody hears the question, hears the responses. So what I would prefer to do is let him get through at least this first part. We'll leave Andy up at the podium, and then we'll give folks an opportunity as they come up and they have questions. He can either clarify, address, etc. So
I apologize.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. Our friends downstairs, I get this little buzzer in my seat, and just to make sure we capture everybody's comments so that we can replay that down the road.
I apologize. Yep. Right now, what I'd like to do is just kind of go over what is on the north side, what is on the south side of those uses. So on the north side, what we are proposing is a potential for a recreation center right on the north quadrant here, in close proximity to the traffic light, provide access into potential building in this location, as well as picnic area, playground, the volleyball courts, recreation fields right here. And this is approximately 20 to 22 acres of size right here. The reason it's been located on the north is to try to minimize traffic that might have to come down and through the site to get to some point in the middle of the site. Try to reduce traffic on Clark Road, try to get people potentially coming from Atlantic and or staying on Whalen roads to get up to this zone. And along this, and I spoke of that recreational trail with fitness stations that would potentially be in this zone. Over to the west a little bit, what you see of these other green blobs, this is a little bit of a layout of where that disc golf course might go. Per Disc Golf of America, you need approximately an acre a hole to make it work. And what we're depicting right here is approximately 17 to 18 acres of the northern portion of the site that could be utilized for disc golf. So what is disc golf? I mean, basically is a basket that's placed in and amongst trees, and you're throwing a disc to that basket. that can be offset and not part of the trail system, something that can operate independently. I don't know if anybody's been to Ellison Park when disc golfers are out there. You can still walk through that area. You can still actively use that space, but it can also be used for disc golf. I spoke about the addition of the parking, potential pavilion in this zone here, and you see a little bit better outline of where that path network might go through the site here. We do have that historic cemetery, which is right on Whalen Road, and we would propose that we provide some type of signage for that, potentially put some fencing around that area to denote it in some fashion. Again, it's one of those historical landmarks within the town that we can kind of accentuate for people. When they get into the site, they can take a walk and they can see that little cemetery that's there. These are the uses that I just kind of covered very, very quickly. Again, we have the cross-country ski trails, the cross-country walking trails, and running trails, orienteering, the meadow areas, such. On the south side, again, we have our existing maintenance facility here. We're looking at potentially a pavilion in this location, extension of vehicular access to a parking area in this zone. We also have the existing barn that exists right here. If that can be reutilized and refurbished, I actually suggest putting in a small parking area in this zone. So maybe that can be reutilized as a picnic pavilion area. But again, we need to take a look at it from an architectural and a structural end to see how viable that is. The cross-country running trail is this larger dash that comes through here, and then walking trails throughout the remainder of the site. And one of the other neat environmental opportunities we have is the creek that runs and flows through the site. And we would anticipate taking trails along that creek and maybe even have outlook areas. Get to a creek and make sure we have and can get to and see that waterway. I spoke of a small shelter and potentially a small shelter in the southwest corner here. You're pretty far removed from accessing a vehicle that's in the north parking area or even the barn area. I think it might be important to have a shelter that if inclement weather does come through, you have someplace to go down in this zone. The last thing is this area here, potentially to be used for that mountain biking, the single track mountain biking. The reason it's being proposed in this area is because this is what the mountain bikers want. They want vertical challenge. They want to go in between trees, and a trail could be developed in here that can give them an awful lot of what we don't have here in this town. We're pretty much on the east side of the city. There's only one or two different places you can go and actually ride off-road. This would be a great opportunity for this portion of the site. And it can be done environmentally sound. This is not an activity that's going to tear this area up. It can go one with nature. It basically is a trail. But one of the reasons it's also down here too, and we don't show an awful lot of connectivity from a pedestrian use, we don't want a conflict. We want to make sure that the conflicts are reduced as much as possible. Mountain bikers can go very, very fast. We don't want walkers on those trails all the time. And it's a little bit of a, yes, we want to be able to get down there. We want to be able to see things. Potentially some pedestrian trails should go down in the area. But we want to make sure that we separate these uses enough so we don't have that conflict, because a mother walking a son, a child, a dog, and having a mountain biker come down that trail. Something that we have to be very, very cognizant of. Again, here's the uses that I speak of, and I go back to the cross-country skiing. I think I've already spoken about that. That might be the area in the south for the groomed trails because of those elevation changes that we have. really think as an overview, I did that relatively quickly. But you do have the maps in front of you, and at this time, Tony, if there's any questions that you might have,
So
or
normally-
anything else I can clarify for you.
Absolutely. So normally what our next course of business would be, there are a number of people that have signed up, and we'll start with that list. Sue will read the name. Just ask that you come to the podium. I'm going to ask Andy if you stay there, if you need to point to something at the map behind you, or if we need to call up something, we can do that. And again, now's the opportunity for folks to weigh in with their thoughts, comments, ideas, something we might have missed, something too much, not enough of, et cetera. Now's the time to do that as we go through. We do have a handful of emails that have come in. We'll make sure we get to those. And of course, the board will have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So I'm going to ask Sue to read the first name. And these are no particular order, how she grabbed them out of the bin. While she's doing that, I'll grab the next round that I know a number of folks signed in, and we'll go through. If you didn't sign in, that's okay. Then we'll get to you next for your comments. So with that, Sue?
It looks like Susan Kavanaugh.
Welcome, Susan. Oh, thank you, Sue.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. My name is Susan Kavanaugh. I live at 15 Vixen Run in the town of Penfield. I was also a member of the town-appointed Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee. So for anyone that is interested or has not yet seen it, the committee filed their report, I don't know if filed is the correct word, but submitted their report to the town board in April of last year. I was one of the co-authors of that report. So I wanted to just point out that there are a few people in the room today that were part of that committee that I can see offhand. Here is Terry Bruce, right over there in the corner. I know Tricia is here in the back. I saw Eric earlier, and I'm sorry if I missed anyone else, and I believe Bob Peterson is listening in from the recording. Is it possible for us to move to the slide that reflected the uses for the Shadow Pines North? Can we go to that slide for a second? I also want to just say that for anybody who hasn't yet seen the report that was submitted, it is available on the town website. Let me start by saying that I can get on board with 90% of what's been presented here today. As a committee, we worked very, very hard for 8 months to come up with recommendations that were heavily weighted by town input. We had a town public meeting where various members of the community came in and talked with us, or at least presented to us their ideas, their thoughts. We went back as a committee and really talked about everything everybody presented. We weighed it out very carefully against our report, and with that, we presented this 22-page report that the board was given on April 9th of last year. I have to be completely blunt and completely honest. I'm really disappointed to see that the first item on this list is a municipal recreation center. On page 17 of our report, we provided a list of land uses that we heavily did not recommend. Now, I've heard it referred to a couple of times tonight, one being a recreation center and one being a recreation area. Those are two different meanings in my opinion. So I would like to get some clarification on whether or not this center is an actual structure on the property, or if this is a recreation area that is an open area that consists of basketball courts, fields, or what have you. And the reason I bring this up is because one of the highlights or the key points that the residents brought up to us in the town meeting that was held was that we needed to stay true to the open space of that land. Putting a structure of a recreation center is completely against what this town wanted, what the residents wanted, and what the committee recommended. So if I could please get some clarification on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
It is a building.
And I would like to...
And it is recreational use. So there are fields, there are playgrounds, and it is a building.
So that being said, I really want to make sure that the board is in fact taking into consideration that the committee recommended highly against this for the sheer purpose that it does not keep the land true to its original intent, which is open green space. There were a lot of discussions within the committee about a recreation center and whether or not Shadow Pines is the right use for it. We also had independent discussions with folks in the rec center currently that did not believe Shadow Pines was the right spot for it, nor did they really want to put the recreation center on Shadow Pines. I really don't think that is in the best interest of this community or the best interest of this board to put a building, a new building, build a structure on that land, right smack in the front end of Shadow Pines, which is what it appears to me. It is just not staying true to the original thought process and the original plan of keeping that land as open and green and recreationally sound as possible for the community. So I'll leave it at that. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that originally, when the committee was informed that the town board would be putting this master planning process out to an RFP, I had a conversation with one or two of the committee members. I think I may have even called Andy about it, to suggest that perhaps BME or the chosen engineering firm have an opportunity to speak with a couple of members of the committee just to understand the stream of consciousness or the thought process that went into providing our report, which I believe would have been extremely helpful. I think that BME did a tremendous job in trying to execute on the plan that the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee put into place. But I do believe that input from the committee would have been a reasonable ask. I know that I would have personally come and met. I think there are a few other folks on the committee that would have been willing to come forward, all that had great ideas and great thought processes. There were a lot of offline discussions that occurred so this report could come to be what this report is. There were subcommittee meetings that did not go on the record that I don't think BME had the privilege of hearing about that I think would have been beneficial to them. So if there is still an opportunity for that, I would like to say it here publicly that I do believe that BME should have an opportunity to speak to at least a handful of the committee members before this report goes into final form and before this master plan is executed on. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Our next speaker.
Terry Bruce.
Well, Terry's coming to the podium. Terry will be leading. He may not be the sole leader, but he'll be one of the leaders this coming Saturday over at Shadow. And Nels Carmen's got some information back there. But over at Shadow Pines, meet in the parking lot. He's going to lead a 2-hour tour through the site, so anyone that has an interest. And that's rain or shine, warm or cool. And Terry is looking for as many people that are willing to come. So.
Last year we had 60 people, and so we have room.
We have 200 acres, so there's plenty of room for another 60.
We should, right, we'll walk all day.
All right.
Anyway, Andy, I had a question for you, basically, first. On the 12th, at the meeting, for the working meeting here, you said that, and again you said it here tonight more or less, that the sport of mountain biking had to be detached or separated from other activities. Am I understanding correctly that that means it would be set aside for the exclusive use of mountain biking and prohibiting general and family usage? You need to.
Please,
Yeah,
please.
any way you want. Sure,
So
sure.
unlike formal public hearings, this is more informal tonight, so we want to make sure that as we go along, we'll try to get answers to questions as best we can. Some questions may have no answers, at least at this point, but the ones that we can answer, let's make sure we answer.
Fair enough. It would not be my position that we should not have that area, my position. I don't believe it's the town's position either. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. That area be exclusive for the use of mountain biking. The intent of showing it on the concept plan is to designate that area as the most appropriate for that use. I think all we really need to do is, in the final design of a single-track area through there, that we do not design in those potential conflicts, that we don't have pedestrian trails that cross over a mountain bike trail. Want to make sure that we have a separation so that we don't have the instance that may occur. That's,
Okay.
because there are absolutely wonderful areas down there to be able to get to
I
and to see.
walked them, I know, yeah, yes. That's, I don't discount that at all. You also said, I think, that the kinds of interesting areas down in that space is what mountain bikers like. And I am confident that you realize that interesting and scenic areas are probably liked by all residents, and might want to have an opportunity to, if they're available, to walk in those areas. So that's an important point for, I think, most of the rest of the community, other than the mountain bikers. Similar to public areas, I think, in neighboring towns, all the paths and trails can and should be shared or multi-purpose by design and signage. For example, in Victor, I know it's a well-known area here that for some of the best mountain biking around. I've talked with them, and they say all their trails are shared use, and they have reported no hiker-biker incidents. So I presume that they have some crossovers there. Personal responsibility, I think, is expected and required of all mixed-use groups, and that the groups who respect each other and are concerned about safety and the well-being of all users, themselves as well as all the others. And that removing 35 acres from the scenic land from public access would be contrary to the desires and expectations of the Penfield community in general. And I think that based on the stated interest in the community input that Susan referred to, that we worked from in the, I didn't say, by the way, I was on the land usage committee also, and I'm also on the trails committee, that the, based on those interests that were outlined to us, the opportunity to walk and hike in any part of this town property was part of the, Susan referred several times to the open aspect, open meaning not just open land, but open access. And so we don't want to, and not wanting to see restricted use of any of the most interesting and scenic areas, or any of the areas, to any one group. And so to be clear, I oppose exclusive use of the property for any group, and I and others support shared use of the property for bikers as well as hikers and families. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Next, we have Mike Ruff.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Ruff. I live at 35 Pond Valley Circle in Penfield, and I wanted to just say ditto to Susan and Terry's comments. I don't want to be redundant, but I want to make sure the board hears me that I agree with everything that they previously said. I also want to say that I, too, can agree with about 90% of what you have developed here, but I want to just give you two other ideas. Long time ago, back in high school, I grew up in Fairport, and I worked for the Fairport Recreation Department, and my job was to help make ice skating rinks. In Parrington, we had 4 parks with ice skating rinks. And in Parrington, families, children, hockey players used those ice skating rinks, got great exercise in the winter, so I'd like to see an ice skating rink. That's one of my suggestions. My second suggestion is, a long time ago in high school, I worked for a pool company called Design Pools in Parrington, and I helped build that outside pool in East Rochester. And if you've ever gone by East Rochester when the when it finally gets over 75 degrees, half of East Rochester is at that pool. So I'd like to see a pool, a swimming pool for the summertime, to have Penfield residents be able to have camaraderie, exercise. Those are my two great ideas.
Coming here for the meeting tonight was a good idea too, Mike.
And welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Our next speaker.
Next, we have, Kate Martle.
Kate McCardle? Yep.
Oh, Kate McCardle, I'm sorry.
My handwriting is awful. I won't.
All right, I might be cheating a little bit. Kate McCardle, 15 Hillside. I'm going to speak on behalf of someone, our good friend Jay Froome. But before, I'd like to make my own personal comments, which is just to piggyback on what everything Susan and Terry have said. I will say I do not agree with the pool. I'm sorry, Mike Ruff. I do think ice skating would be a good idea. But as this community voted, and as we have been working as, whether it be advocates, the town, and now our great consultant here, the intended use and what we had voted on as a community was to see open space, and I think most of this plan reflects that. There's some great, as we noted, some great environmental options here, and I'm mostly happy with what has come. I definitely do not support a recreation center there, a physical structure. I think there's other places in the town that would benefit from having a facility if a facility is needed, but I do not think the location here should house a center. Also, just one other comment on, sorry, I must have walked up here pretty fast. I'm out of breath.
Take a deep breath.
I do not have the coronavirus, I swear. The other piece, just when we're looking at building either whether it's some type of courts, I'm certainly supportive of recreational sites. I would like to think, knowing that the town is, sustainability is always an environmental leadership, looking at these things, thinking about permeable structures. So when we're looking at flooding that may be coming with climate change, looking at the options of permeable surfaces that can be had, whether it be tennis courts or other courts, and any opportunity to expand recreation is ideal. So I would love to see, whether it be disc golf or other recreational opportunities. I love the idea of orienteering, getting kids out. That's fantastic. But I don't think that this town needs another manicured field. I do not think that this town needs another playground, and I have small children, but I don't think that this space needs that built within the plan. So I would not agree with those options. I think that's all for me. I am going to try to make Jay Froome's comments brief. They're 3 pages here, so I'll do my best to summarize. And I'm sorry, Jay Froome, if you're watching this from Florida, I'm taking my own power here. So Jay Froome, as many of you know, was very active in the Shadow Pines community, our advocacy group. He has lived here since 1981, and he believes, I'm going to speak like him. Sorry, I'm just going to say I believe. It's easier to read. I believe I am pretty qualified to make some observations as a resident and neighbor to the Shadow Pines property. My first priority is to side with the people that want the Pines 200 acres to be left open to sanctuary open space, as it was called in the past comprehensive plans. This plan is somewhat in line with the moratorium committee and the Shadow Pines land use committee. Passive use of the land for recreation with maybe some pavilions and picnic tables or picnic areas along with hiking paths is what many envision and would like. I'm with this group, even though I think it's unlikely to be kept that way. The proposed land usage by BME, that is being discussed tonight adds to the concept with a new recreation center building, which I am against. 35 acres for mountain biking on the back 9, playground and possible basketball courts, and maybe a pickleball or tennis court, enough mowed ground for up to 4 soccer fields, frisbee golf, and all of that. All of those things, he didn't clarify, but it sounded like he was in support of those. If this is what's going to happen, sometimes on the order of what the draft plan is proposing with guidance from the town board, then I would like to make a suggestion, even though it is against the open sanctuary concept I support and not 100% in compliance with what the Shadow Pines Land Use Committee recommended when they said that they didn't want anything with fences. Since a rec center building is on the plan, one can only assume that the town board suggests that they put it on. So again, if this is the path that the town is going to take, my suggestion is a small pickleball complex of at least 12 or 16 courts with room for more. I don't think this is a surprise. If you've talked to Jim Froome, you know he loves pickleball. This is the fastest growing sport in America by far and is played by many adults in the 55 plus age group, which is an astounding 35% of the Penfield population per the just completed update to the 2019 Parks and Rec Master Plan. The committee didn't recommend this, and I don't know if they even discussed the sporting need of the 55-plus adults in Penfield. It's a huge oversight, in my opinion. These needs have been discussed in many town plans over the last 20 years, and I feel they have been ignored. 12 courts take up the space of 4 tennis courts, so it does not use that much land. He then goes on to share many examples, which I can send to you.
Perfect.
A lot.
Because I see poor Andy here writing feverishly,
I'll
so.
just hand it to you. I'm going to hand it to you. There is a wonderful summary of the places that he has gone to in Florida, which I think will be beneficial for reference points. And basically what he's observing is a huge amount of people, and particularly in communities that are smaller than Penfield, that have incredible amounts of people visiting these pickleball courts. So sorry, Jay Froome, you can be mad at me later for not reading that all. Just a summary, having 30 to 100 people at a time in the morning and then again in the late afternoon, early evening, using the park every day when the weather cooperates, might even open some more usages and bids for the Clark House to operate as a clubhouse restaurant in the future for those pickleball and neighborhood people. I love that. If the town is going to consider some or all of the conceptual plan, then the town should seriously consider pickleball courts with a minimum of 12 courts to start. There is nothing else like this in Rochester. Again, my first priority is the open sanctuary, space, and usage. But if some or all of the proposal is enacted, then you owe it to the 55-plus group to consider pickleball courts. It is more pertinent to the big percentage of our population than any of the other usages being discussed tonight.
Right. So would you do me a favor, Kate?
Yeah.
Would you give that to Sue, please? And then what she'll do is she'll scan it, she'll send it to Andy, and she'll send it to the town board. Thank you very much. Thanks. All right, our next speaker, please.
Next, we have Donna Spinella.
Two weeks in a row.
Not including my birthday.
And not including your birthday, that's right. Very true.
My name is Donna Spinella. I live at 39 Scarborough Park in Penfield. As everyone has already commented, the overwhelming sentiment when we went through the process of saving Shadow Pines was for as much open space as possible and low-impact passive recreation. The Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee, made up of very dedicated citizens, took in a lot of information from the broader community about other uses that would be of interest and of value, some soccer fields and things of that nature. And we really respect what the advisory committee came up with. I am on a similar sort of committee, and I know how hard the work is and how much we all try to take into what our community's needs will be best served by. So when I saw that a recreation center was shown on the property, and I had read the Shadow Pines Land Use Group's recommendations, and that was their first recommendation was no built big structures on that property. And I saw that as the number one thing on your list. I have to ask you, Andy, what caused you to either disregard what the advisory committee recommended, or what what inspired you to put it on there? I just need to know that.
So what I'll say, Donna, and what I'll just remind everyone here this evening is that if you recall, when the vote was taken, it was indicated it was a combination of open space and for general municipal use. And we held a number of different meetings, and at those information meetings we had prior to the vote, one of the things that was discussed was community center, library, or other town facilities. And so Andy had the benefit, or BME had the benefit of that presentation that was made to the general public prior to the vote. So I don't want to speak for Andy, but all that information was when staff sat down once we rendered or hired the services of BME. What we did was we did a data dump of everything. So we gave them the moratorium committee's report, we gave them the land use report, we gave them all of the materials that led up to the vote, and that's where that came from. So we the town provided all that information.
Okay, well, I guess I would like to suggest then that, Andy, that you sit down, as Susan suggested, the first speaker suggested, that you sit down with members of that advisory committee to get their thinking on why they recommended so strongly against a big built structure there, and get it in a kind of a nuanced way, not sort of fire hose like we're doing at tonight's meeting. I don't mean to sort of accuse you, but I think to understand that in a more nuanced way would perhaps change your thinking about how we do this plan. And I'd also like to remind people that the Rothfuss Park plan that was done many years ago when that park was first laid out, that park was designed with a recreation center in mind. If you drive in that park, you see all the parking, you see the big circle. The idea was to have eventually a recreation center there when A, the need arose, and B, the funding could be coherently, gotten. So I would like to say, Andy, I don't know if that was shared with you, that if you've ever taken a look at Rothfuss Park and seen how beautifully laid out that is for something just like this. I'd also like to ask what accommodations on this plan are there for mobility impaired residents of our town?
I believe all of the path networks that exist today, anything that's asphalt today, can be utilized by ability impaired and can be made ADA accessible. Even if those paths deteriorate, there are path types that can be utilized and comply with ADA regulations. It would be the intent to provide as many locations as possible to have that occur throughout the entire site.
Okay, and that includes dealing with grading issues for, say, people in wheelchairs and stuff?
To the greatest extent practicable.
Gotcha. Okay.
There are some areas of the site that would not be practical.
Right, the back nine is not.
To try to provide that connectivity. Wherever it can, yes, definitely.
Okay,
Definitely.
that's great, because that would not only serve those with mobility impairments,
So Donna,
but with
if you
people
would,
with...
I'm sorry, yep, bring that down, thank you.
Yep, so that would be great, because it would not only serve people with mobility impairments, but people with young children, people with strollers, so on and so forth. And lastly, I guess I would have to say, I'm afraid I disagree with my friend Mike about the pool. I couldn't go for a pool, but as a former ice hockey player, I could definitely go for an ice rink.
Thank you, Don. Our next speaker, please.
Okay, is Mindy McLaren.
Mindy McLaren. Welcome, Mindy.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Mindy McLaren. I live at 1724 5 Mile Line Road. And my concern, just like the other speakers, is with this plan relates mostly to the proposed rec center. To me, it seems like overreach to put it at Shadow Pines, considering that in the 2010 comp plan, Rothfuss Park was identified as the location for this kind of building. There's parking already existing, and as Donna mentioned, the circular driveway that's just sort of waiting for a building to be put there. We have 2 playgrounds there as well right now. And the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee explicitly recommended against putting a recreation center or community center at Shadow Pines. So I feel that any new building of this type should go to Rothfuss Park. There already are structures at Shadow Pines, namely the Clark House and its associated buildings that could and should be used for this purpose. I'd prefer to see my tax dollars go to the renovation of the Clark House for this use as a rec center, rather than toward a new build on this property. And residents voted not only to save Shadow Pines, but also to save the Clark House. Keeping the Clark House as a functional part of Shadow Pines keeps the character, as well as making this plan more cohesive. I might suggest creating a similar committee as the Moratorium Committee and the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee, but perhaps to determine the viability of the Clark House as a recreation center. It could consist of town board members, historic preservation board members, preservation experts, and interested residents, of which I would be willing to serve on that committee. I just want to caution that in this case, as I agree with my friends, that this is a wonderful plan. I'm really proud of the town of Penfield and all of us working together to save this property, but I just want to caution that less is more in this case. Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. Thank you. Okay, we have gone through those that have signed up, so we will next move on to those that would like to speak to this matter. So hand one back here, 2, 3, and 4, Eric, and then we'll start that again. I think that's all I can remember here, and make sure we get everyone. We'll stay here as long as we need to get all the comments.
Good evening. I'm Bob Ansaldi. I live at 10 Oatsfield Circle in Penfield. I'm also a member of the Penfield Trails Committee. First of all, I also vote no on a rec center on the site. And also, no pool would be my vote. But in terms of building, one of the things that isn't clear to me, is there going to be bathrooms on the site? And then the other thing is, I'm also a part-time cross-country official, and I cannot imagine a cross-country race that has to cross Clark Road. That just would not work from my experience. So I appreciate the 5K course, but if you're expecting races, you're not going to be able to cross, because the kids get spread out too much to be able to stop traffic on a reasonable basis.
Okay, thank you. So Eddie, would you like to comment on the bathroom piece? Probably there's a number of walkers that you get out, and it seems like whenever I'm out on a hike, that's one of the things that come to mind first is where do you go to the bathroom? So.
Yeah, and I think one of the intended uses for the Clark House would also be a public location, and that's where bathrooms might be accommodated. They already exist there today. They could be refurbished and/or enhanced. But beyond that, I don't believe we're looking at trying to put restrooms everywhere through this site. And so I think the Clark House is going to be the main location where that would occur.
So I think one of the things that I would just offer out as one of the comments is that as we continue to take a look and massage and work through whatever the final product for this site is, it might be something for us to take a look at. Obviously, having sanitary sewers is real easy because you can tie into a sanitary sewer. If you're in the back 9, you would have to have, some type of leach fields or holding tank or something like that. But I might ask that as you're looking at and considering all these, just one item to kind of put in your back pocket to at least take a look at.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
Great.
Yep.
Yes, come forward, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Tricia Bhattacharya. I live at 26 Denonville Ridge. I was also part of the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee. I echo the sentiments that have been made about the rec center. I also echo Mindy's statements about being really proud of the town of Penfield for saving this property. Also, I believe the plan that BME put together really highlights the beauty of the property and puts the appropriate things in the appropriate spaces. So I'm really very happy, for the most part, outside the rec center, pretty happy about that. What I am concerned about, though, is the accessibility to the property. It's where I live at the top of the hill on Clark Road, and there are no sidewalks. And Clark Road is a really dangerous road, especially if you're going down that curvy hill. It's not safe for kids, and I don't even feel safe walking on that. So I really would like to see some sidewalks on Clark that run the whole way, because right now they run from Browncroft to a little bit past Harwood, and then they end.
Right.
And so if we could extend, I know it's an expensive task, but if we can extend that to at least an access point onto the property, that would improve the safety of the accessibility. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
We got some of our team members in the back, Mr. Valentine, who is our Director of Engineering and Planning, and each year rolls out for the town board a list of sidewalk locations that have been identified in the previous year and previous years. And that's something I'm sure he'll add to that list for at least consideration and prioritization. So yes, I think right next to Mr. Ruff. Yes, Mel Callan. Sorry, Mel, you were kind of sitting low, or I was sitting not high enough, or something. There you go. You hid well.
Good evening, Mel Callan. I live at 1410 Harris Road. Just a couple extra comments as well, echoing some that have already been made. First of all, I know, sir, that you said that you consulted with a number of groups. I'm just wondering, were any of those groups local environmental groups that you consulted with? I heard you say Boy Scouts and I don't know what else, but any other environmental groups that you consulted with? No. It might be a good idea to go back and ask some of them, because certainly I agree with what people have said, that most of the plan seems very reasonable, but I just want to be sure that with the environmental groups who are the experts and how these things are kind of laid out, then it might be wise to just consult with some environmental groups as well.
Mel, do you have a recommendation of a particular group you're
Genesee
thinking of?
Valley Land Trust, the Conservation Group,
Okay.
I mean, any of those that are local as well.
Yep, thank you.
And then, I was disappointed and surprised, as Susan said, that a lot of our colleagues and residents in Penfield put a lot of time into the Land Use Advisory Committee, and yet I would think that would be the first committee that BME would want to consult with, to say, well, I read your report, what do you think? This is what we're thinking. At some point, I would think there would have been some consultation with our resident committee that was asked to put in a lot of time and effort into this. So I was surprised that they were not. The disc golf, 17 acres. I think you said you're a fan of that, which is great. But I don't know anything about disc golf, but according to PDGA, as you say, they recommend about an acre per hole. And they also said they usually plan in areas of 3 acres. So I'm wondering, you've got 17 acres for it. Could we cut it down to maybe 12 or 15 acres? Just something to consider. The mountain bike area, I got to say 35 acres for that. I know mountain bikers like to have as large spread as possible because of the twists and turns and everything. But for this particular area of Shadow Pines, in fact, all of Shadow Pines, I would disagree with having a mountain bike area.
At all?
At all.
No, at all. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Finally, the rec center. And I know, Tony, you just said that the recommendation came from the town board. The vote, that was the recommendation? I mean, it clearly didn't come from BME, right? You said it came from...
So what I said, just to repeat it myself so that we're clear, is that when everyone voted on the property, it was for open space and general municipal use. That was part of the actual wording in what we voted for. And what I said is that I had prepared and had held information meetings, and I believe that presentation that I made is still on the website. But one of the things that we had identified through that was that this area could be used for a community center or a library or other general municipal use.
So did you get any towns residents that came out in flocks of people coming to ask you, can you have a recreation center there, please?
I'm just saying that 80% of us that voted for it, that was part of what the vote was. That was actually on the tag of the vote. Do you vote yes? Do you vote no?
But did you interpret that as a new structure being built on Shadow Pines?
Well, again, we said for general municipal use, and again, when I did the presentation, the information meeting prior to the vote, that was listed in that presentation as possible uses. I think if you go back and take a look at that, Mel, there were a number of different uses that were proposed that it could be. There could be pavilions. It could be hiking, biking, cross-country skiing, buildings such as a library and or a recreation facility. So that was part of that discussion that we had prior to the vote.
Well, in all of this discussion about a new structure, it would seem to make sense, since I know there was a lot of previous interest in utilizing Clark House, either as a restaurant or some other facility, to utilize what we have, or that smaller building there next to the Clark House. I'm just wondering if that was considered. And also in all of this discussion, I haven't heard for what purpose, how big would it be? More details about this new structure of a recreation center. Could you provide some of that information?
Sure. So, Andy, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think whatever the size of this structure, I think, is still up for potential discussion. Right now, what we're showing is about a 20,000 square foot footprint for a structure. We're showing parking that might be at 120 parking spaces or so around that facility. That's what's being depicted. That has not been confirmed. That has not been
What would it be
fully.
used for?
It could be used as a recreation center. It might be able to be used for an educational center. That sort of use.
Well, I think not only from the folks that came out, the 7,000 folks that came out or so, you heard a lot of desire to keep it open space. Now, we knew we weren't going to have over 200 acres in completely open space. So I would agree that most of this design, I think, is quite appropriate and would be good for Penfield. But I think what you're hearing, even previously, because I know there were also rumors about having the bus facility there, the bus garage there, and some of that was rumors, and you didn't know what to believe. But a brand-new structure...
Well, I will tell you that it wasn't rumored. I mean, the school district actually sent us a letter and asked if we would consider carving out a space for a bus garage. So that wasn't rumor. There is a letter on file, and I think the committee may have had access to that as part of that, because again, what the school district elected to do was just say, hey, we're looking, you just are looking to acquire this piece of property, would you consider? And so that was all fed into, but there was, that wasn't rumor, that was an actual ask by the school district.
Okay. Have you considered using the Clark House or that other smaller building for a rec center? And I'm still not clear what you would use it for.
Well, I think if you take a look at the rec center we have today, so I'm going to just go by what we have today over on Baird Road. There's a gymnasium there. We have a number of rooms that we use for breakouts for Zumba classes and yoga classes, tiny tots, in the gym, pickleball in the gym. We have rooms for senior citizens. We've got a room for the library there. We've got the large room, which was part of the cafeteria, that we break that up for program space.
Yeah, I'm
And as
familiar
our
with what's there now.
Yeah, so as our programs continue to grow and expand, we're busting at the seams at the community center.
And what about the idea of having the community center at Roth's Park?
So that has been discussed as part of the master plan for that. They had talked about having a building, I believe at the time it was about 10 to 12,000 square foot, and they identified it as program space. It was a program center, and we have that map that we certainly can share as part of that. It wasn't intended to be a full-blown recreation center with all the amenities that are at Baird Road today.
So the new structure, what's being proposed at Shadow Pines, is that meant to recreate the amount of programs that are at Baird Road?
It is meant to increase in size so that we have the availability of our additional programming that we have a need for today.
Could you consider using Clark House or the other smaller building?
Certainly, that's an idea that we can crank into this as well, to take a look at that.
Okay, that would be a strong recommendation. I think what you're hearing from many speakers here is to utilize the Clark House or the smaller building to expand some kind of recreation center activities. Otherwise, go back to the drawing board at Roth's Park, which is what it originally was planned for, and rather than build a brand-new structure on Shadow Pines, which I think you've heard from not only this group of people, but from many others that was not desired, including the recommendations from the citizens that were appointed to the Land Use Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mel. Thank you. And I think Eric was next. Gentleman here, and then gentleman back there. Eric.
My name is Eric Metzler. I was also on the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee. I just wanted to thank Susan and everybody else who was part of that committee. It's pretty neat to be seeing all of our hard work kind of coming to implementation here, so that's pretty exciting. I also wanted to just thank Andy and BME. I think overall you've done a fantastic job representing what it is that we wanted to see on the property. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I agree with everybody else who signed on to that recommendation that we were not interested in seeing a rec center on the property. One of the other things I'd like to ask for, or advocate for, I guess, is some kind of connectivity on Wayland Road all the way to the east. I live down off of 5 Mile Line Road, and so I occasionally run up there, and it's a little rough when the sidewalk ends about 100 yards short of the property, and then getting into the property, at least right now, it's very overgrown, and so it's a little bit difficult to run there, but I would love to be able to use that as a place where I can run from my house without having to drive somewhere to go there. One thing I want to talk briefly about is the mountain biking. It is a little disappointing to hear some of the same stereotypes about mountain bikers that I've been hearing for the last 15, 20 years around Rochester. I think overall the attitudes towards mountain biking has been getting a lot better, but some of those still exist, and not blaming anybody or anything like that, but it's kind of the it's the stereotype that we typically get. But I would encourage you to look around at the town of Victor, the town of Webster, Monroe County. All of them have parks that mountain bikers and hikers and dog walkers and trail runners all use all at the same time throughout the year. And you can go to any of those places and talk to the land managers there, and you're going to see that there really has not been conflicts. You can do a lot to mitigate any kind of, I guess, speed-related conflicts through trail design. But in general, that kind of thing doesn't really exist anyway. I think it's kind of a misconception. The area that right now is designated for mountain biking as not only a cross-country skier and runner and hiker, I definitely would not want to see that area or any other area of the park kind of relegated towards one use, preventing other people from using that area. I've been mountain biking for 20 years. I do like very challenging trails. I do like higher speeds, things like that. That is not the kind of thing that I think this property is really best for. I'm also in the vast minority of riders being at that kind of level. I ride with my young children. They couldn't ride 90% of that 35 acres that is there. It would just be too difficult for them to ride, and they actually represent far more of the average rider than I do. So it would be nice to see that maybe spread out more across the south end of the property. The other thing about mountain bike trails or just single track trails in general is that a 3-foot trail tread that you typically need for hiking or mountain biking, a 1-mile trail takes up about 1 acre of total land. So putting 3 or 4 miles of trails that meander throughout the property down there are not only going to utilize very small amount of space, but if they're crisscrossing over other trails, and especially if it's done strategically, you're not going to have people running into each other or anything like that. But you're also going to spread out that use. If it's concentrated into a very small area, it's going to make it hard for anybody else to use that area. And also for anybody who's walked through that area down there, there's, I would say, probably 20 acres of that are actually usable space. The rest of it is, there's kind of a ravine that runs through there and steep terrain that is just unsuitable for any kind of trails at all. So I just encourage you to think more openly about kind of spreading that usage out and kind of overlapping some of that human-powered usage in the south. So thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Ned Benson. I live at 108 Harwood Circle. I was not on the committee, so I feel kind of different up here. My questions are going to pertain a little bit to the area. If I can look at the map here. This is Harwood here. And I think that was the 5th hole. And looking at the map tonight, I see that we were supposed to have a buffer, hopefully, between the houses and the park. And it looks to me now that we're going to jam the disc golf right up against our house. So it looks like, according to that map, the disc golf is going to come right up to my property line. I really would like to push request that we keep the buffer in place and maybe not bring it over quite so far. Right now, the trails that are there in place, the town is mowed basically down the center of the fairways, and it makes it a nice, for the people to walk. They did like a double mow, make it nice and wide. But it's far enough away from the property that, we can see the people walking by, but we're not bothered by anybody, going on the trails. And actually, we enjoy watching everybody go by. A couple weeks ago, the cross-country skiers were really flying when we got that warm patch, and then must have got a little icy, and boy, they were flying like crazy, so it was really kind of fun to watch. So a couple of things along that. I would ask, just a curiosity, if they're going to upgrade the materials for the paths. There's a section that's right out behind our house as you come up to the green, and it is like super wet and sloggy. And there's actually a couple of spots. My wife has walked the south side and said that it was too wet, so we haven't gone back over there. But are they going to enhance any of the trails? I know, like, Corbett's Glen, they did wood chips, and a lot of it they did some crushed stone, and so it makes for a nice path, even if it's wet, to get through. So is that anything that, if you want to, I got a couple more. So the main thing was the disc golf up against the property, and also about the paths. And then my last one is that while I don't want to limit anybody access to the park, obviously my property is where the path is, and right here. And right now, we bought that house because it was on a golf course, and we were excited to live on a golf course. But the lady that we bought it from was the person that actually built the house. So since 1959, she and her family have maintained the property that is actually town property, I guess, where the right-of-way is, and we have taken over and we've done it since 2015. So we've maintained that piece of property. There's actually boulders in place and big, huge pine trees to block anybody from like driving in or whatever. The people on the street and people, I think, on Clark Road sort of have, I mean, without ever telling anybody, we have people that know that that's a town right-of-way, and so people come and they walk through our side yard and go up into the park. And we have no problem with that. It's just that I was a little bit curious if you're going to now put in a big road. Are you going to make some sort of huge thing, or can we just leave it the way it is and let people have access through there? I'm not real crazy about having the road extended through or whatever. So I guess that's the couple things. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just to address a few items. No, it is not the intent of providing a roadway on Hardwood Circle. It's for pedestrian connectivity only. So if there is an existing trail that exists there today, potentially it would be upgraded to some form so that it promotes that connectivity through that area. With all the trails on the course, and somebody else had a question about whether or not they would be accessible. In the course of true design and final design for implementation, we have to take a look at what type of material we could use on a pathway that would be acceptable for the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's one thing that we do. Sometimes wood chips are not an acceptable surface. So it could be a stone, it could be a stone dust, something of that nature. But
got lots of it across the street.
Lots of it across the street. Yes, they do, actually. Grab your pail, go over, and bring it back. So I think one of the other things that we take a look at, too, is if we have a naturally wet area and there's a trail that's there today, does it actually have to be there tomorrow? If that's naturally wet, allow it to be naturally wet. Allow it to drain off naturally. Move the trail. Find another location that it can go. With all of this, and I go back to some of the earlier things I said, this is conceptual in nature. It is trying to put the uses that we gleaned from the reports onto the site. Final design will have to be done for each and every one of these elements before it can be implemented. The disc golf course. The intent was just to show that we would want to potentially have a couple baskets along that edge. It is not the intent to remove trees for the disc golf course. The intent is, and I would invite you to go down to Ellison Park and see what they've done.
I know. We've lived in this area for 30-something years, so I know Ellison Park real well.
So, there's holes that are in the trees, and you walk around the trees, and you're going through, and what this area has to offer from a disc golf course perspective is, and where we've kind of shown where it's going, are in between the fairways. So in those tree areas. So put a basket in a grouping of 5 trees or so, and that's what you're aiming for. That's the intent of how it would be located. It's not our intent to suggest that there's going to be a hole that is immediately adjacent to your property.
Okay. And then just for the town, and so like if the town would then end up starting to maintain the piece of property going between the two houses? If they're going to have a path or something there?
Well, I'm not prepared tonight to say yes or no, Ned, about that. I guess it depends upon what the final plan looks like, what the material might be, so we'll have to take a look at that. So I'm not going to say definitely yes, and we don't get to that portion for 3 years, 5 years, or whatever. So we'll, as we go through, and I think as Andy said, that once we get to a point that we finalize the plan, we're not going to be able to build that overnight. So it'll be a phased, some type of a phased-in approach. And as we go through, there'll be some element of design that'll have to be as part of that. And then, one of the things we're going to be taking a look at is, how do we do it, minimize our maintenance, still make things accessible, but minimize our maintenance overall.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, sure thing, Ned. Thank you. Yes, sir. And then after this gentleman, see a couple of hands. We'll do the two right up front here. Ma'am, you'll go first, and then Mr. Moore, you will go second. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dan Reichman. I live at 185 Beverly Drive in the town of Brighton. I have 2 children in the on the cross-country ski team here in Penfield. And this is my first time participating in one of these meetings, so I just want to kind of speak as a parent of who's aware of the way that this user group is going to use this space, and just make one recommendation, which is that, first of all, let me say it's fantastic that the committee has been so supportive of cross-country skiing with the space, and I think the kids and the school district are just super excited about the opportunities that this would provide. One point that I want to make, though, is that the teams, both middle school and high school, meet at Bay Trail Middle School, and to get to these trails, they have to cross at night often across Atlantic Ave and Scribner, Wayland, that intersection. If the groomed trails are only on the south side of the property, there won't be good connectivity for them to travel here to get. And so what I would suggest is just having one groomed access trail so that the teams that will be using it every day will be able to get to that area without having to walk at night or trudge through snow carrying their skis and then cross Clark Road. So just wanted to sort of advocate on behalf of that user group, and thank you to the committee and to everyone who is involved for putting cross-country skiing so prominently into this plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
I'll be brief. I'm Claudia Thomas. I reside at 1911 Clark Road, and my concern is with the wildlife. It seems to be there's a considerable amount of wildlife traveling from the top of the hill to Huntington Meadows. Actually, it goes to Wayland as well, but the area of concentration is the top of the hill in Huntington Meadows. And they do cross during the day, at night. I was wondering if an area has been set aside as Forever Wild to provide refuge for the current wildlife.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Claudia. Mr. Moore. So Mr. Moore is coming up. Mr. Moore is a senior at Penfield High School and the newest member of the Penfield Conservation Board. Welcome, sir.
Well, glad to be here. My name is Daniel Moore. As you said, I'm the newest Conservation Board member, as you said, as well, and I am also the newest Eagle Scout of my Troop 312.
So, yeah.
As an Eagle Scout, and a senior, as you said, I am phasing out of scouting. However, I'm going to continue with scouting. But with scouting comes a lot of camping. My troop goes camping at least once every month. And during a conversation with Mr. Fountain, I suggested scout camping areas. This would be for primarily younger scouts, since my troop is, generally speaking, more younger now than when I first started. And this would be an excellent property to have scout camping areas, primarily because it is in Penfield, and that since younger scouts, they would feel more at home, and that they would be more likely to stay on this property since they know of it. And the ability to have campfires and the ability to have tent camping here for a weekend would definitely be of interest. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. All right. Jeff Burns. Anyone else? We'll get lined up. Yes, ma'am. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Tony. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff Burns. I live at 39 Scarborough Park. I was one of the founders of Save Shadow Pines along with Mindy McLaren and Kate McCardle. I think we started it the day we heard that the land went up for sale and started a website and a Facebook page. We did a lot of work going door to door. We had public information sessions. We attended all of the public hearings. And I got to tell you, I don't recall anybody standing up and saying they wanted to have a recreation center in Shadow Pines. What I ran into much more often was people who really wanted to see a park that was preserving open space in as natural a state as possible. A lot of people told me that they felt as though there were a lot of parks in town already that have been heavily developed they're developed parks with all sorts of play fields and things like that, and that we needed a place that was set aside for nature, where people could go and enjoy it, have multiple uses, passive uses, but mostly to have one park at least where we could have more of a natural landscape. So I recall being at one of the public hearings where the concept of having a net recreation center in town in the Shadow Pines was brought up. And I recall standing up and saying, look, we've worked so hard to protect this from residential development. We really don't want to see this go to municipal development now. So I'm concerned about the size of the recreational center that's proposed there. Did I understand it would be like 20,000 square feet? And how many parking spaces would be around the building there?
What's being depicted right now is about 120 spaces.
Okay. 120 spaces. And I understand also from the town's perspective that there's a need, and there will be a need sometime to have another recreation center, and that there are things that we could do that could be tremendous with a new recreation center, having a clean slate to work with. But again, I'd encourage the town to look again at Rothfuss Park and look at the design that was there. I've looked at that design as well, that circle. It looks like it's all set up, and that is a developed park, and it seems like a good location then to have a rec center, and there's tons of parking there. There's plenty of room for a rec center. You know, I don't mean to be unreasonable with this. I guess I would need to be convinced as to why a rec center would be necessary in Shadow Pines as opposed to Rothfuss when we have a space there. If there's a great reason for it, I'm all ears to hearing that. But it seems like Rothfuss was set aside for it, and that the overwhelming opinion of people that I heard speak at the public hearings and at our information center sessions and things was for more of naturally preserved open space. Going to the mountain biking, one thing I wanted to point out is that, I can't get to the microphone. I noticed
we can bring the board a little closer. I get whispered there. Oh, great. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Okay. It appeared to me that most of the mountain biking section is actually in, is this on?
I think it is. Tap it a little bit.
Okay.
There you go.
It's mostly a wooded section, and I think a lot of us didn't even know that it was part of Shadow Pines. So I think the effect for most of us that go hiking in this area and go walking, that this is not an area that many people would be going through anyways. I think it's great that it would be mixed use, that it's not just mountain biking, that we can go in there. But I'm fully in support of having a mountain biking area here, knowing also that this is really the fairway right through here. This is the way we walk when we walk through there. Not that many people would walk through here anyways, but with the mountain biking trail, there will be a new opportunity to walk through there and a new opportunity to explore that area. I haven't been through very much of that area yet. One concern I have about mountain biking, a personal concern, is this is one of the most beautiful spots, I think, in the park, right near Sawmill where that circle is. There's a sudden drop in the elevation there, and you end up there's a cart path, and it brings you right down to the stream, and there's a bridge there and stuff. And I just hope that that would be an area where we're careful about mountain biking use. I know that most mountain bikers are very careful and stuff, but you could go 100 miles an hour there, and I'd like to see that that's preserved so that people can enjoy that, and that everybody can go into that area. It's if you haven't been there, go there. It's great. Let's see. Also, I was interested in, are there any costs projected on any of this? Like, what will a recreation center conceivably cost?
We're a long ways away from that,
Okay.
Jeff.
Yeah.
One of the things we've got to do first is get a sense of what the uses are,
Sure.
and then from there you can build a budget.
Okay. And the timing. Are we looking at that corner up here with this development, with this, the proposed timing of this? Is this 1 year away, 5 years away, 10 years away? Do we have any idea of that? Or this is, again, conceptual, and it's just, this may be sometime, kind of like the recreation center that's shown in Rothfuss Park?
14 years ago.
Yeah, okay, and that's 14 years, yeah, okay. You know, I know that when we were working so hard to preserve Shadow Pines, there was a lot of pushback by a certain group saying, the town can't afford this, so I'm concerned about the town suddenly being able to afford a rec center. I'm not against a rec center. I think it's a wonderful thing, but I know that there were people that were pushing against even buying Shadow Pines because they were concerned about the expense. And in terms of other people have brought this up, that Clark House is a special place. I'd certainly like to see that preserved and utilized. I think a lot of us would like to see a restaurant there, but maybe that's not in the cards. But if there's some way that the town could use it, if not for a restaurant, if that would be some way of handling some of the overflow from the rec center, the current rec center, to have some of the offices there or a place for cross-country skiing. We've also got the cart house there, which was quite large, and it seems like that could be reutilized. We've got the barn, and that barn, I know that structural problems there, but again, it could be fixed up, and it seems like there's potential. It's, I believe it's post and beam. Seems like there should be some way we can fix that, and it could possibly be utilized as one of the pavilions. And then there's the storage building on Whalen, and I haven't heard of any proposed use for that as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing us use everything we got there in some manner or another. I'm glad to hear that the various areas and the various uses, that it's not restrictive. It wasn't intended to be restrictive. That was something that was concerning me, that it would be mixed use, even the Frisbee golf, that we just have to be careful that we don't get bonked in the head by a Frisbee when we're walking through there, but common sense. One thing I would like to see in a plan is something that you touched on, was about the kind of natural landscape and how we can help it along, and also that there may be selective cutting that's appropriate in places. You know, not to be cutting down forests, cutting down trees a whole lot, but that we may want to have a brush cutter through certain sections so that we maintain it as a meadow and stuff like that. And I don't think we should allow it to grow haphazardly unless that's exactly what we want, unless we make a conscious decision to have an area grow and just reforest. That would be fine, but if we haven't made a decision, then I think there's a maintenance that's required with it as well. But the maintenance with the area in general is also an area that's dear to my heart, where there have been concerns about the Clark House, that it seems like it had been deteriorating there for a while. I was concerned. I had seen there were trees growing in the gutters because there was so much dirt that had washed down into the gutters, and I think that's improved, and it looks like there's been some basic maintenance, but I want to make sure that we don't let that go to pot. That's an important part of our town history. Excuse me. So I think that's about it for me. I think I've covered what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Huntington Meadows contingent, Mrs. Samuels, welcome.
This one still works too, but...
This is better.
I like that.
Okay? I belong to Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and we have a very strict policy about speaking into the mic. And if you're talking over here, you're not speaking into the mic. It's important. I'm sitting back there straining to hear what all these comments have been. And I'm in that 35% of the older people that live in Penfield, and I guess I need to get that hearing aid soon.
And for the record, if you wouldn't mind.
My name is Carol Samuel, and I live at 27 Huntington Meadow.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that the couple just left whose daughter was one of the two daughters who worked so hard to get our sidewalk plan coming for Huntington Meadow. It's coming this spring. Some trees have already been cut down. That will be a great place directly across from Huntington Meadow to have a pedestrian access to Shadow Pines. It'll be a very good place. I'm concerned about the paths that are already in existence with the blacktop for the people who are in their wheelchairs. Last Sunday was such a beautiful day, and I was out there with, yes, my little dog, and I had great conversations with a family, and one fellow was in a motorized wheelchair. And I realized, as I was heading off to another part of Shadow Pines, that they were restricted because they couldn't go. There's a lot of places where a macadam path ends that would have come up to a hole naturally in the golf course for the golf carts, but for this fellow, he didn't have access to as much as might be possible. On the south side, as you go down beside the barn and you go down that slope, it's really, really wet. There's a big puddle down there in these defrosting days, and I hope that some drainage will be addressed for the paths that go down the hill there. I think it's pretty important. And I wonder, regarding that building that we wished wasn't going to happen, can't we add to the existing recreation center that we have for all the offices and classrooms and places where people are going to that rec center? Adding on would seem to me to be a whole lot cheaper than building a new building.
So what I'll say, Carol, is that at the community center today, if you take a look at the parking lot, the paved surface, you take a look at the building, that's all we own. Everything else around it is owned by the school district.
Okay, well, I will...
So that's why we haven't been able to look to expand, because to expand we'll lose parking, and right now we have a lot of problems with parking today because we share parking with the school district.
Okay, I accept that. Then I will also make my advocacy for going over to the other part where it was once planned. And I have a lot of sympathy for your shaking hand. Oh, yes, with the pointer. I understand that there's a group that's going to be working to put new trees on Shadow Pines, and I'm very excited about that. So
I'll just say that I guess I'm not aware of that. I'm aware that there is approximately 50 trees it's in conjunction with Cobble's School going at Rothfuss Park, but not at Shadow Pines.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought we had a group that
you may have more intel than I do.
I don't know. I'd be very glad to put a tree on that place, and we took down an awful lot of trees along Wayland Road so that we'd have a better sight for the deer, and I still have never seen a deer crossing there. They were using my driveway this morning, but...
Only one?
No, it was two. It was two big mamas. Thank you. I really appreciate all that we've heard about, and I hope that some of the restrictions will be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Carol.
And I would like to see very much that this microphone system be improved, or the sound system. I'm serious.
That some good information. I think Mr. Renner, who is our guy downstairs that keeps the mics going and sound system and everything like that, he has a plan that he shared with me here not too long ago. So
it's not new.
Well, his current plan is new. All right, others. Nels, come right forward. Nels Carmen. Nels is our chairman of our Trails Committee, behind those Foster Grant glasses and underneath that hat.
An invitation. March 14th, Saturday, before 10 o'clock, get to the Clark House parking lot. We will conduct our monthly Penfield Trails Committee hike. Terry will lead. We will show you the back 9 or the south side and how pristine and wonderful and open space it is right now. Feet and eyeballs. Look for the hike signs turning in on Clark Road.
Thank you, Nels. All right, other speakers, other first-time speakers. Then we'll shift to second-time speakers. Any other first-time speakers? All right. No first-time speakers? All right, then second-time speakers. Yes, sir. Nels? Or Ned, excuse me.
With regards to the Clark House, I know that was a separate piece of property that was purchased at the time of the land, and I thought that there was possibly an idea of trying to get somebody to either buy it or turn it into another restaurant or something like that. So is that the case, or is the town going to own it and keep it, and would it be something that we could use for a rec center?
So today, the town owns it, and it's our interest, at least this board's interest, to keep it in the town's ownership at this time. We went out for an RFP. We had a number of people come in and indicate some interest. Some of those have backed away. There was a group, Tryon Bikes, that had an interest, and they had a partnership with someone that wanted to run the restaurant. Tryon Bikes backed away because they had a number of other commitments, and the group that was thinking about the restaurant end of it is still looking at it or evaluating it at this time. No formal proposals have been received. They've been in a couple of times to take a look at it. The building needs some work, both from a structural standpoint and from a cosmetic standpoint. And we've had Plan Engineering that the town works with. We have contracted with them to give us a proposal on the work that needs to be done in that building, and then a priority order for that. So that's where we stand today.
Very good.
Yep, sure thing, Ned, absolutely. Yes, Mel? We have history. I know it's not always quick.
Mel Callan, 1410 Harris Road. Interesting, nothing about cost has come up. So, I don't know, was there a budget from what you planned so far? Was there a budget given as well, or?
No.
No? No. What is the?
$100 million.
Okay, sold.
Well, so as we said earlier, we're in the concept stages. So
Right.
Until we figure out what the final plan is to go through and start to assign cost when things, as was proposed here. Andy has taken a number of notes. We've heard a lot of comments. We're going to leave this public information meeting open for several weeks to give folks an opportunity to have some soak time from what they've heard. If they have any other thoughts or ideas, they can submit that via our website, snail mail, what have you. But at this point, we haven't even pulled out the spreadsheet to start to talk about cost, Mel.
Okay, so maybe not even a ballpark figure is what I'm hearing.
100 million. Well, I'm not being facetious. I mean, right now, I guess that's the best number that I can give you. It certainly will be less than that. And again, it depends upon what we ultimately end up doing.
Okay.
And then how participation goes. I mean, there has been a number of groups and organizations, whether it's the Scouts, whether it's mountain biking, whether it's other organizations, have offered to help and assist. And so that type of labor is a real plus, because there's some ownership and work that they do. A lot of those folks that come and have developed different things at parks know what they're doing, how to do it, how to preserve it, how to minimize erosion and things like that. So all of those will have to be taken into account. If you think that you're going to see a shovel in the ground over the next couple of years for anything other than maybe some maintenance of existing trails and things like that, you probably won't see that happen.
Okay, so I get that, but just what's your thought process about whatever assistance you can get from any other organizations that participate? What's your thought process as far as the town's responsibility financially for it? Where would that come? Will you be asking for a referendum, a bond? Have you thought about where the town's responsibility for it would come from financially?
Yeah, it's going to be town land, and a majority of the work that is done there, whatever that ends up being, is going to be town responsibility. So
Okay.
So the town will pay for that. So whether we can do small things on a year-to-year basis, if we bundle some larger things and go out with a bond, that's an opportunity or a potential. So again, until we get a sense of what the final plan is, it really is premature talking about cost.
And then finally, you mentioned a time frame, not a shovel in the ground in the next couple of years, most likely.
Right.
What's your time frame to, once the final plan is approved, and you find out what all the financial resources are going to be?
Sure.
What's your time frame? 5 years, 10 years?
This is what I'll say to you, Mel. 14 years ago, I was on the town board when we adopted the plan for Rothfuss Park. So 14 years later, you have what you have there today, and there's still an opportunity for additional things. There's still a plan.
Like a rec center?
There is. Well, the building that was proposed, again, was in the neighborhood of 10 to 12,000. What we had heard, and again, we'd have to take a look at a number of programs, what the needs are, what have you. Could it be there? Possibly. And again, we'll have to talk about the size. Would a 20,000 potential, that's the number that Andy put out, would a 20,000-foot building fit within that area and within that neighborhood? So 14 years later, we haven't finished Rothfuss Park. So if you expect this to be finished anytime in the next few years, probably not going to happen. Again, if we have the residents come out and say, you know what, we're willing to borrow $2, $3, $4, $5 million and let's get it done, then that's another discussion to be had.
All right,
but
we'll work on that.
But I will tell you, I've been in office a little over 10 years. I have never had anyone come into my office and ask me to raise taxes.
But you did get, over 7,000 people to vote to save Shadow Pines.
And that's a vote. And that's a vote. And so if we were to go out for a bond, and that's what we did to buy the property, if we were to go out for a bond for $2, $3, $5 million to enhance the property, and it passes, then we'll start to work as soon as it passes.
Okay, group, we got more work to do.
So there you go. Carol?
So it's Carol Samuel from Huntington Meadow. One thought about having a rec center building on that property compared to having it at Rothfuss is the traffic pattern. And it would divert some of the traffic to an area that is not as busy as the Atlantic Avenue and Wayland and Scribner corner. Take some of it off of that area that's just so very busy, and off the Clark Road and all that stuff. So I think the idea of where that rec center building goes, I think there's a lot of reason not to put it on Shadow Pines.
Okay.
I mean, we certainly, as a group of Save Shadow Pines people, saw the traffic, and we worked the traffic with our signs, too, when we were trying to promote our vote. But traffic is real. So I vote for a building on Rothfuss Park.
Okay. Yes, Susan.
I don't have my notes with me right now, so it'll be brief, I promise. I just have a quick question about the maintenance of the property coming up on spring. I know that last year we didn't quite have the appropriate budget in place to keep regular maintenance up with the property because of the nature of the vote and when it took place and the timing of the year. So I was just curious about, now that we're coming up on spring, the grasses are going to grow longer and so on and so forth. Is there a plan or a cadence for maintenance of the property so that people can enjoy it without weeds growing knee-high, or what's the plan for that?
So the plan is not to mow the whole site. That has never been the plan. There is money in the budget for mowing, some wander mowing, so we'll mow the pathways, the double-wide pathways as we have. We'll keep up the maintenance around the Clark House. We're going to be doing some additional maintenance around. There's some drainage work that we have to do on the cart barn. That east wall of the cart barn is falling in. And so some basic work is going to have to be done on that. So we do have money in the budget for 2020 to do what I'll call basic maintenance work for the property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff? You have your notes, so that it could be more lengthy.
I'll be very fast. I just wanted to add something that Carol alluded to, was that a lot of trees were cut when it was discovered that there were trees that were diseased along the buffer, along the border of the property and all. And I think I've heard a lot of people say that they would like to see reestablishment or replanting of some of those trees. There are parts of shadow pines that seem very exposed now, and before it was there was a very nice buffer. I mean, it was something that John Odenbach had worked very hard in terms of creating that line of trees, and it was a beautiful part of shadow pines. And anytime I drove down Whalen along there with the trees on both sides, you felt like you're out in the country all of a sudden. It was great. Still nice now, but I'd love to see the trees reestablished, and I think a lot of other people would too. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other first time, second time, third time? Going once? Going twice? Okay, thank you very much for everyone.
Comments that we have.
Oh, good point, excuse me. Hold on, hold tight. Mr. Moore reminded me we do have some comments that we have to add, so thank you, Mr. Moore, please. Thank you.
For the record, I just would like to add, as a part of this public meeting, an email that I received from Mark Sowden, who is the Scoutmaster at Troop 312 at Penfield Presbyterian Church. His email reads, "Dear Town Board members, I will not be able to attend the public participation meeting regarding Shadow Pines Conceptual Master Plan, as Wednesday night is Scout Troop nights. I'd like to make a few comments on the Conceptual Master Plan, which overlooks the wonderful and includes the most of all the activities recommended by the committee. However, the online document, which I cannot completely read," and he states as one, "there appears to be a large density of recreation facilities in Shadow Pines North, volleyball court, pavilion, and others, but there is no other associated parking in that area. The closest area for parking is proposed by the Clark House, which are a long walk from the recreation areas, especially if carrying picnic and cookout items. If the Clark House is sold or leased, it probably will not be sold, or leased, could the parking lot become inaccessible? Could then become inaccessible. Please move the proposed parking further north. Is it large enough? Question mark. Second comment. What contact has been made by BME Associates with the Rochester Orienteering Club? I have been pushing to support for the installation of such course or courses, having in such discussion with the club and Andrew Spencer from BME. I'd like to propose that Scout Troop 312 can sponsor installation with the appropriate guidance from ROC. Some of their contact information has been shared with BME Associates as attached, and Andrew, I'll make sure you get this. Comment number 3. With the existing proposed cross-country trails, presumably for school district training and/or meets, who will maintain the trails in a usable condition? Will the town have to add to their budget for the upkeep or try to share costs with the school district? Question mark. The north and south areas will require a lot of upkeep, especially to keep disc golf areas clear too. Again, that's email I received from Mark Sowden, Scoutmaster, Troop 312 in Penfield Presbyterian Church. Andrew, I'll make sure you get this as a matter of the record for your consideration.
And if you would, to Sue as well.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. All right, I have two letters, two emails that have come in. This one is from Bob Peterson, 1931 Clark Road. Primary concerns. He talks about municipal building is not appropriate. February 2018 referendum authorized the town board to spend $3.4 million to save Shadow Pines from development. Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee advises against the new municipal buildings, including a Penfield Recreation Center, and he references page 4 and 17 of the final report to the town board dated April 17th, 2019. Second, the mountain bike area, it appears that 35 acres or more acres have been set aside for an exclusive use by mountain bikes. This seems excessive and runs counter to the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee emphasis on low-impact multiple-use activities. Also, loss of trees, a replanting program is needed in a buffer zone and elsewhere on the property to replace trees that have been removed due to the age, illness, and storm damage. Community groups such as Rotary, Friends of Shadow Pines, Boy and Girl Scout groups, etc., can help make that happen. What to call it? Shadow Pines Recreation Area needs a name and a set of appropriate signs. Restrooms, where will the restrooms and water facilities be located? And then costs, the town board and taxpayers should be informed of the relative cost to implement and maintain the various activities and venues addressed in the master plan. Again, from Robert Peterson, Clark Road. The second one is from Sue and Tim Murphy, and it addressed to the board. After reviewing the concept master plan, I want to offer the following comments and questions, as they're not be able to attend this meeting tonight. Comment, our initial take on the proposed future development is more than we imagined for former Shadow Pines golf course property. Leaving the land as open space, however, that gets defined seemed to be the overriding priority of the committee and the community. Question, was the Dolomite/Oldcastle mined use plan filed with the DEC considered in the plans for development? If not, why not? John Odenbach's vision for the use of the land and the adjacent quarry are linked at some point in the future when the quarry will go offline. And need to be integrated into a land use for this area. Accommodations and/or connections should be anticipated. So I'll just ask Andy, did you take a look at the quarry property at all in conjunction with this proposed concept plan?
We did not.
Okay, so he did not. I think the only comment that I would offer is this is private property at this time. We also know that, and it's been put on the record, that the quarry has at least another 30 years of life for that. But again, no plans have been incorporated for what's being proposed tonight and what the potential use for the quarry is 30 or more years down the road.
Correct.
Why didn't BME Associates staff meet in person with the Shadow Pines Land Use Committee before sharing the draft plan to facilitate getting current and historical information? An example topic would be past situation with mountain biking. Community hopes that the Town Trails Committee's position. Question, what is the proposed use of the rec center shown on the northeast section of the property? What is the approximate size and square footage? I think we have talked about that, and I'm sure Tim and Sue will, if they're not watching, will be watching this video. With approximately, was the proximity of the very busy Atlantic 286 Scribner-Whalen intersection considered in the rec center siting? It could add even more vehicle traffic to the area, and the parking lot, outlet, and curb cuts would be close to that intersection. And Andy, I'll give you and Sue a copy of this as well. The Rothfuss Park Plan also shows a future recreation building, and there is currently some infrastructure already in place. Are the two future sites being considered for similar activities and events? Are there advantages of one site over another? And certainly that'll be something that will be discussed in more detail as a result of tonight's meeting. Question, please explain the distinction between mountain biking and non-mountain biking routes and paths. Will the paved cart paths be used for shared usage, including bicycles? And will there be single track for mountain bikes covering the 35 acres? And I think we did cover that overall through some of the questions that have come in. Question, will project development priorities include specific phases, timeline estimates, cost projections be included when the draft plan is adopted by the town board leadership? And I would say that definitely one of the things that we're going to have to take a look at is some type of logical phasing. And once the plan gets to a point that we consider it that final plan, then we'll have to get into discussions about the appropriate phasing. And then once we identify phasing, then we can start to identify costs associated with that. Will capital project and annual operating cost expenses for the development and maintenance be generated and shared and included in the adopted plan? What is the current cost to maintain an acre of playground, parkland versus green space? And so that's something that we can provide some information on. Question, town leadership voted against allowing off-road bicycle infrastructure in Sherwood Fields about 10 years ago. What is the sentiment of the town board currently, and what has changed? So what the Murphys are referring to is that the town board approximately 10 years ago, because it was when I first came into office, one of the discussions was about Sherwood Fields. It was just getting ready to be open. The town board voted to hold off on mountain biking in that area until the park got established. And I will tell you that in the last 9+ years, I have had very few people ask about any type of mountain biking at Sherwood Fields. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen at some time, but it hasn't necessarily floated to the top of the priority list overall. Last question, will the town board be supportive of reconstituting the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board so that the community is in an ongoing opportunity to assist, guide, support development facility staff and program? And I think what this board has done now for a number of years, that as projects have come up, they've appointed a working group like we did with the Moratorium Committee and the Land Use Committee. So at this time, I will say that it's not on the radar screen to recreate that committee. So there you go.
I don't know whether or not you received this. I received this late this afternoon.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, and this is from Sam Ogie. Sam is located at 1924 Clark Road, and thanks to the town board for a continuing commitment to follow the community's expressed preferences regarding Shadow Pines property. I was pleased to see the conceptual plan largely adheres the recommendations of the Shadow Pines Land Use Committee. The following are my concerns and questions in order of priority. So priority 1, 90% of the people who bring dogs on the property let them run off leash. What does the town plan to do about this? Being dogs, they don't respect the property boundaries. They run into my yard regularly. They're dangerous to bicycle riders, and other residents should not have to be concerned about being jumped on by dogs, or even worse, bitten. Would a fenced-in no leash area help? Today, the town does have a requirement. Dogs have to be leashed. So if you're out in the community, they have to be leashed. If you're on your own property, you have an invisible fence or a regular fence, they can be off leash. So I think I'll give this back to you, Andy. Actually, if you don't mind, I'll give it to Sue. We'll scan it into the record, and then we'll make sure you get it back. I guess the question Sam is leaving, would a fenced-in no-leash area help? The second priority, pedestrian connectivity is nice, but at least 2 of them don't make sense. The first one, the west access point, Clark Road, is not in the vicinity of any sidewalk who would use it. The residents of Huntington Meadow will use the east access point directly across from Huntington Meadows, I think as Carol Samuels had indicated. The residents on the north and south section of Clark Road would have to walk on the road around a dangerous curve to access the west access point. B, why is the pedestrian access point at the south end of the mountain biking area? There is no walking path close to that point, so people will have to be walking on a mountain bike trail, not safe. This third item, I like that mountain biking area is confined to the most challenging terrain on the property. There are some beautiful parts of the creek in the northwest corner of the property. However, that would have been nice to access with a paved path or dirt walking path. 4, does the town plan to keep bicycles off any of the paths, and if so, how? If not, why not? I've been run over by a bicycle. Little kids need some space where they can be safe from bikes wherever, somehow, or somewhere, excuse me, besides the playground area. 5, why will the cross-country ski trails not be groomed on the north side? They're groomed now. I saw the snowmobile grooming them daily last month. And then the last item, can some space be set aside for a butterfly garden or native plant area? This past summer, there were a number of beautiful weeds growing in the back 9. It would be nice for an educational area for kids, school groups, and could be maintained by a community garden group. And again, this was submitted by Sam Ogie on Clark Road. Thanks, Bob. Okay, I think we've entered into the record all the comments that we received, and I think we have found our way to the end. I'm going to declare this public information meeting closed. We will hold it open for several weeks to allow folks, if they have other thoughts, additional input, that they can submit that. And then I'm going to ask folks, because we're going to take just a 2-minute recess, but we've got to start up with our work session because we do have a number of individuals here on matters that the board needs to discuss. So I might ask if you're welcome to stay here as long as you like. I would just ask if you could go out into the rotunda area. That'd be wonderful. Thank you very much for everyone participating. We'll take a short recess, and we'll pick up in about 2 minutes.